We just came off the most snowfall ever recorded at TF Green in the Providence area. What do we have? We have breaking news with Jason Dorse.
Read that number.
This is TF Green?
TF Green.
32.8 inches of snow, guys.
Wow.
That is the all-time greatest snowstorm. I never thought in my lifetime, John, we would see a snow total eclipse the blizzard of 1978. So let's first get your thoughts on that. Do you agree with that? You followed along closely, I'm sure, but what are your thoughts on that?
I did follow that, Mark. The funny thing was, you know how measuring snow goes. You have people who will call in. There are some people who are good observers, other people who will go out and measure drift and give you a big reading. But when I saw all of the reports coming in of 3 feet, 36.5, 30, that sort, I said, my gosh, really, there really was 3 feet of snow. And the blizzard of 78 never came close to that, obviously. Yeah. And although there were some reports of, 40 odd inches in the northern part of Rhode Island, but again, you don't know how reliable those ratings are. You don't know whether people were measuring drifts or not.
Right. No, I 100% agree on that. So let's talk about that in 1978. Now, of course, I remember it. I was 6 years old at the time, but you were already a legend at that point. But you established yourself firmly as the guy, the meteorologist, because you forecasted it. You were onto it.
It still continues to be mainly a southern New England snowstorm.
How many days in advance did you see the signals that 78 was going to be something of that size?
I think, well, no, as far as something of what it ended up being, or
yeah.
I don't think I don't think until it started, I don't think I really had a clue that it was going to end up being, 28 or whatever the final totals were at the Weather Service. I thought it was going to be a 12 to 18 type thing, and in fact, it probably would have been if it wasn't for that little loop that the center of the storm took south of us during Monday and Tuesday. Yeah, it just stalled it out basically, and that was the big kicker that made it such a big storm.
Yeah, John, do you remember the forecast model that you were using back in 1978? Was the NGM around at that time? What was that?
Yeah, it was the NGM.
Yeah, the AVN, was the AVN a thing then, or was that still pre?
Yeah, it was still
aviation
it was pretty much the NGM, I think, at that point. We weren't, very frankly, very equipped to get a lot of that type of data very quickly either, because we had at the time teletypes and fax machines and stuff like that. Yeah. And, so we really our communications as far as getting data from the Weather Service was not anything near what it is today.
But I will say in this blizzard too, right? So we go back to the Friday before. Blizzard started late Sunday night into Monday here. That Friday before, all of a sudden, a collective pit in the stomach came in the afternoon, and we said, "Oh my goodness, this is going to be something." We'd been tracking it all week, thinking this might go to our south. This might not be a big impact. And all of a sudden, I remember Friday for the 6 o'clock news, I said, "Okay, I think like a foot or more is possible." Yeah. But then from that Friday, we went from a foot or more to forecasting 24 to 36 inches of snow, 48 hours later. It's amazing how quickly that changed. And you sort of, you can relate to that in 78 as well.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's remarkable, I think, with this storm that we're talking about, the heaviest, the 3 foot type stuff was in a band that's not really that wide. I mean, when you consider it, because if you came up, here in Portland, Maine, where I live now, in the Portland, Maine area, we had barely, I think, 4 inches of snow out of this. And if you went farther south, as you go down toward Massachusetts, it got bigger then. So that band, and that's the toughest thing to do, Mark, as you well know. Yeah. How do you 2 days in advance or a day in advance, how do you forecast a relatively narrow band of 3 feet of snow?
Well, and that's what I was telling our team of meteorologists, even that morning when, I slept here at the station and got up about 6:30 in the morning. And as soon as I looked at, I believe AJ, our meteorologist, AJ Mastrangelo, was on the air at the time. And we looked at the radar and I said, whoa, that band's not moving. We're going to have trouble here. But I
Yeah.
think the distinction there between 78 and 26, one of the major distinctions was 78 was a widespread area of that 18 to 28 inch area of snowfall, right? This time around, as you mentioned, a fairly relatively narrow, relatively speaking, 24 to 36. Outside of that area, there was a wide range of maybe a foot to 18 inches. Big drop off outside of that zone.
Absolutely. And the 78 storm was really a massive cyclone. I mean, it covered, as you just mentioned with the snowfall, it covered a wide area. Whereas as I saw this, and I don't have any of the data that you have, but it seemed to me that it was really not as big a storm area-wise.
Right. Let's talk about the days after the storm. This was the first time in my career, as a kid, different, but in my forecasting career, 32 years now, that I can remember schools being out for the entire week. So the storm obviously started raging on that early Monday morning. School systems were out for the entire week. That's the first time I've seen that since 78, I believe.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable in that sense as well. In 78, I can remember Monday morning in particular, when the snow really began to come in, people were not prepared to cancel school, to not go to work, to hunker down. And as you saw, as all of the photographs and tape from the storm indicate, there was just chaos because everyone was stuck where they had been. They were stuck in place. Yeah. And a lot of times I was on a highway or was certainly not at home.
Those images of cars being abandoned on Interstate 95, 195, all the major, just the traffic jam, and then the rate at which the snow had to have been falling at times right during the blizzard of 78, similar to what 26 did, and that 3 to 4 inch per hour, maybe not as consistently as it did for the blizzard of 26, but it did fall heavy enough to pile up around cars where people had to get out and abandon them. I think that's what, do you think we would ever get back to that point because of the technology now, the warnings that we have, and the lessons that were learned in 78?
Right.
Will we ever get back to the point where there's going to be that amount of car carnage abandoned on highways?
Well, let me ask you this. How many cars were abandoned in this storm highway? How many people were trapped where they were, going to strangers' houses just to get being invited into strangers' houses just to get out of the storm? How much did that happen in this storm?
Well, I don't think it happened at a big level, because I think there's a travel ban that was put into effect by the governor of Rhode Island. He put it in at 7 p.m. the night before it even started snowing. And then I believe Governor Healy in Massachusetts added that for portions of Massachusetts that were the hardest hit early on Monday. But I do think that travel ban played a huge role in it. Tractor trailer ban starting at 5, travel ban for everybody else starting at 7, to ensure that people did get off the roads, because, I made the decision here. Initially, I was going to stay at a hotel down the road thinking, okay, I'll do the 11 o'clock news. I'll go 4 miles away to the hotel. Right. And then when I started to look at the data, I said, even being 4 miles away on Monday morning at the height of this blizzard, I'm not going to get in. I have to stay here. And, it's strange to think that, we all have 4-wheel drive vehicles now. Very few of us probably did back in 78. I think we all feel like, hey, we can get through anything today. But doesn't matter how good a 4-wheel drive vehicle you had at the height of that blizzard here Monday morning, you weren't getting.
You weren't going anywhere. And I think that, that type of thing, though, is a legacy of the blizzard of 78, because people said, we don't want this to happen again. Right. And since then, and through this storm, people, the travel bans are in, everyone's very aware, people don't go to work, they're calling in, it's so that is a legacy, I think, of the blizzard of 78. We're now at the point where we say, we're going to get a couple of feet of snow, let's forget about doing anything.
Yeah, I like that. I do like that. I think that this is a wake-up call. As you know, John, our previous several winters, we've had very little snow. And whether it's a sense of complacency, people have been lulled to sleep, or, there's an element of people that are relatively new to southern New England say, we don't get big snowstorms here anymore. I think this was a giant slap in the face wake-up call. we could still get clobbered, and to the point where we've never been hit like this before.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to talk about your experience, during the storm. I know Channel 10 was in the outlet building downtown at the time, and
Yeah.
what were your thoughts on that when you went to work? That it started snowing on the Monday, so you got in prior to the snowfall, right? I would assume your shift was normally the evening shift. Is that correct?
Yes, I was. It was actually, we never had much of a morning show then. It was mainly a noon and the evening weathercast on TV. And Art Lake lived in Greenville. He was our only other weather person at the time. And he was stuck out in Greenville, and he always did the weekend weather. And so he got stuck out there. And consequently, it was me or no one else. And once I got in, obviously, I think at first, I can't remember. My memory, it's such a long time ago, and I'm an old guy.
It's a long time. It's almost 50 years, yeah.
Long time, but I think my plans were actually to try and get back home, to get back home.
Yeah.
And I never did, and slept on the floor of the weather center.
That must have been nice.
That night. And eventually, since the studio was in the outlet department store on the 5th floor, we all went down and slept in the furniture section of the department store.
Amazing.
Overnight. So we had beds down there. There were mattresses and stuff were all strewn around. And so and I was in until Thursday when I lived in Seekonk.
Okay.
And
so you came in on Monday. It started snowing like 10:30 or so on Monday morning, and you stayed through Thursday.
I was there through Thursday, and finally someone with a snowmobile that could get me out to my house and get me a little break and get out in from Greenville.
Get Art in to take a couple of shifts.
Yeah,
that is crazy. John, let's talk about this.
Geez,
you see that? We've got a little glare on it. Let me get. So this was you and I and Steve Cascioni. We worked together at Channel 6.
Channel 6, right?
Yep. I was your intern in the early 90s, and then I was your colleague. It was my first TV job working with you. Learned so much from you and from Steve. And we did this promo in 1998. This was on the 20th anniversary of the blizzard of 78.
I can't believe
Does this bring back memories? First of all, why did they give us those hats?
Something, I don't remember anything. Some of you'll have to talk with people in the promo department to find out.
I think our friend Judy Shoemaker. Do you remember that name? Remember Judy?
I do remember that. And,
this was the whole gut milk campaign, and they painted on fake milk mustaches on us.
They painted milk mustaches on us, gave us those stupid hats, and we had
the whole thing decked out. We did a whole I think it was a half hour, maybe even an hour special on it. And I remember thinking that as a kid, like, oh my goodness, the blizzard of 78, 20 years ago. It seemed like a lifetime ago to me.
Yeah.
But of course that was 1998. That was a lifetime ago for a lot of people that are probably watching this right now. Yeah. And I think my generation, I grew up, thinking the 78 was the biggest thing ever. And I'm sure now we have an entire generation that's going to think of when they think snow, they think blizzards. They're going to think of the blizzard of 2026.
Well, it's funny. My grandfather, who was born in the 1800s, he always mentions the blizzard in what was it, 1886. So there was a big blizzard back then, and that up until the blizzard of 78, that was the benchmark storm for New England.
Sure.
Snowstorm, and now we got another one.
Yeah, amazing. Let me ask you this question too, John, kind of unrelated to blizzards, but we talk about your knowledge and your there's no one that's a greater expert on Southern New England weather, history, impacts. Does the thought of a landfalling hurricane scare you more than anything else when it comes to Southern New England?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I lived through Hurricane Carol in 54. I was, let's see, how old? I was about 14, 15 years old, and weather was as you know, when you were a kid, weather was a giant hobby and something just intrigued me no end. And I was living in Braintree, Massachusetts, where I was born and brought up. And Carol came right smack over that area.
Yeah.
And it was just devastating. I mean, what I saw happen during that storm,
Yeah.
I don't ever want to see again.
I agree with you on that. And I think, the blizzards and, this was a very serious storm, the blizzard of 2026. But if people do the right thing and they stay inside, it had more of a jovial, fun feeling to it for the most part. I mean, it was dangerous to move the snow, et cetera, but a lot of fun pictures that come into the station and a lot of people having a good time. I think, from my perspective, I agree with you 100% that I don't ever want it on my watch to have to be working something on the level of Carol or 38. I mean, even, I remember Gloria in 85 as a kid and Bob in 91, very, very serious and destructive storms. And just think about how much more population there is now, people living near the water compared to 1954 with Carol.
Oh, absolutely.
Just never want to see something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not too much to forecast, but it probably will happen.
Well, we never thought that, we beat 78, and let's hope we never are forecasting a stronger hurricane than Carol.
Yeah,
or 38.
absolutely.
Right.